All right, welcome to the fourth screencast for Chapter 6. Chapter 6, we've been talking about efficiency of markets, and we used producer surplus and consumer surplus to talk about the total surplus, and the total surplus was maximized, which meant efficiency for us when we have perfectly competitive markets, right? So now we're going to start looking at ways in which we get away from perfectly competitive markets. We've already done that before with price floors and price ceilings, and we're going to come back to that and look at how that affects consumer and producer surplus a little later. But for now, we're going to talk about taxes. And so what we're going to talk about is the incidence of a tax. The incidence of a tax is who actually pays the tax. All right. So what we're going to see is just because a tax is put on producers or put on consumers doesn't necessarily mean they're the ones who pay all of that tax. All right. So why do we pay taxes, first of all? Well, taxes pay for public goods, police, roads, national defense. They subsidize the university here. They pay for social welfare programs. They pay for all sorts of things, some of which you probably like and some of which you probably don't like. But that's the reason that we pay taxes, all right? What are some different types of taxes? Well, there's income tax, payroll tax, corporate taxes, sales taxes, excise taxes, and estate taxes. And there's others. We're going to talk about in this chapter primarily just the excise tax, which just means a per unit tax on a good, all right? So when you buy a gallon of gas, you pay so much tax. When you buy a pack of cigarettes, you pay so much tax. That kind of tax. It's a per unit tax, all right? So it's a tax on a specific good. Alcohol, tobacco, gasoline all have excise taxes on them, all right? And so what we're going to be getting at is the incidence of those taxes. Again, incidence just means who the burden falls on, all right? Or what's the split between producers and consumers. That's the incidence of the tax, all right? The burden of the tax. So it refers to the party, consumers or producers, who bears the actual tax burden, okay? So let's bring in our basic supply and demand diagram here. And we're going to have, this is our equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity down here. It didn't show up, but we can put that in really quick. Equilibrium quantity down here. And this is our no tax world, all right? So now we're going to come in and the government's going to put a per unit tax on milk, so per gallon of milk, and they're going to put it on the demand side, all right? So they're going to say, demanders, you have to pay, buyers by law, you have to pay $1 per gallon of milk, okay? So the burden shifts the curve of who it is legally placed on. So here, it's legally put on the demand side, so the tax shifts the demand curve by $1 everywhere, all the way down. It shifts it by $1. So where this intercepts this axis and this intercepts this axis, that distance is $1, all right? So there's a $1 shift down in the demand curve because by law, the tax was placed on buyers, okay? So what's going to happen? Well, we're actually going to get a new equilibrium price, all right? This is going to be the price that the sellers receive, and this is going to be the price that the buyers pay, all right? So you put the tax on the side of the market that it's legally put on. That new cross is going to be actually the price that the other side gets. So notice this is the price sellers receive, all right? And then you add the tax to that, and that is the price that the buyers actually pay. So here, legally, the tax was put on the buyers. But because of the forces of supply and demand, sellers ended up paying 50 cents of the tax, and buyers ended up paying 50 cents of the tax. It's not going to always be an even split, but for now, I just want us to get a handle on how the tax on buyers affects the supply and demand, affects the equilibrium price that is transacted. In other words, this is what the sellers receive, this is what the buyers pay. The dollar difference is the size of the tax, all right? So there, yeah, that dollar difference is the size of the tax. Looks like my quantity came in here at 1,000. So now let's look at what it looks like when it's a tax on the sellers of the good, okay? So it's the same setup. We've got our equilibrium due to supply and demand, and we're going to keep the price at $4. Equilibrium quantity showed up this time at 1,000 units, all right? Now, by law, the tax is going to be placed on the sellers. So sellers must pay the government, we're going to do $1 again per gallon of milk that they sell, all right? So again, you follow the same steps. You say, well, who is it legally placed on? And you shift their curve, all right? So legally, the tax here is being placed on the sellers. So the seller's curve shifts up $1 here because it's increasing what the price for them. So sellers, it shifts up by the amount of the tax, $1. So this distance here is $1, all right? So what happens? Well, there's going to be a new equilibrium here, and this is the equilibrium for the other side. It's the price that buyers pay, all right? Because you have to subtract the amount of the tax down to find the price that sellers receive at $3.50, okay? So again, the total amount of the tax here was $1, all right? But notice that just because the tax by law went on to the suppliers doesn't mean they paid all of it. Here, the incidence of this tax is evenly split. Again, it's not always going to be the case, but here it is, all right? So the buyers paid 50 cents of the tax, the sellers paid 50 cents of the tax, all right? So going forward in the next screencast, we're going to look at how depending on the supply and demand, and it's going to be the elasticity is what's going to matter, the buyers might pay more of the tax or the sellers might pay more of the tax.